Happy Sabbath. Let me see. Get this and make sure. Oh, yep. So this morning, I wanted to talk about Laodicea and a case of mistaken eggs. As I was working on this sermon this week, I was thinking about different things that could be the title, and I thought, that sounds kind of catchy and interesting. It'll make people think, wonder what this is about. Before I get into it, I did want to talk a little bit about Laodicea. So Laodicea, this sermon and this focus comes from Revelation chapter 3, in which Jesus appears. This is after Jesus has risen and he's coming back. He appears to John on the island of Patmos. John has been placed in exile, and it's a period of great tribulation for the early church. There's lots of persecution that's going on. And when Jesus appears to John on the island, he tells John that he wants John to write these letters to go to the 7 churches in the area to give them some information and pass along information from Jesus to these churches. Laodicea was the last church, the 7th church that John was directed to send this message to. And as the last church, it was also a very wealthy church, a very wealthy people that lived there. We'll learn a little bit more about that as we go through the sermon. But just have that in the back of your mind as we're going through this. And I know a lot of scholars, a lot of biblical scholars look at the 7 churches as a way of discussing the 7 periods throughout history of churches. And there's a lot of relationship between this church of Laodicea and our church today. The Laodiceans, for example, were the most wealthy church in the region. If we look at a timeline of history of humanity, a lot of people agree that the time that we live in today is probably the most wealthy time that we could be living. Part of that can be seen. I had an event earlier this week at work that was going to be a very important event. I was told that I had to have everything go perfectly for this event, and I needed tablecloths because there was going to be eating. I was told that we could not use the room that we wanted to use if we did not have tablecloths, so I placed an order for tablecloths, and the day before the event, the tablecloths were supposed to arrive. They had been delayed. I would not get them until the time that the event was supposed to take place, so quickly I went online, searched, I was able to find tablecloths and get them delivered to my house in 3 hours, saved the day. That is a sign of being in a very wealthy sort of a position that we're able to just go online and buy something. 3 hours later, I don't have to do anything. I get home and there it is on my doorstep. So people back in this time for Laodicea, that would be unheard of and unthought of to be able to order something and have it delivered in 3 hours at your door. All of that being said, we'll look at, I've got the scripture today of Revelation chapter 3, verse 8. Now, just to be clear, this is not from that chapter, not from the part of the chapter that looks at Laodicea. This is to the church of Philadelphia. There's a lot of interesting comparisons that you can make between these 2 churches, but this verse in particular is reflected, it's here, and then it's kind of reflected again in the verses about Laodicea. It says, I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and not denied my name. Now we're going to take a little bit of a pivot here. I want to first talk about this guy, Nicholas Tinbergen, who was an ethnologist. He ran a series of experiments in the 1930s and 40s where he was looking at eggs. And there it goes. He specifically was working with oyster catcher birds that lived along the coast, And he ran an experiment that's now known as the oyster catcher experiment, where he presented nesting oyster catcher birds with a choice between their own normal-sized eggs and a series of dummy plaster eggs that him and his team created. The stimulus of the experiment was that the researchers crafted these massive plaster eggs. Some were up to 4 size the time of a normal egg, and there's a little demonstration here of the bird with one of those giant eggs, and if that bird tried to sit on that egg, it's not going to work, right? It's going to fall off of the egg. But the birds loved these plaster eggs. Their reaction to it was they consistently abandoned their own real clutches of eggs that they had made to instead go and sit on the giant plaster eggs. The consequence of this is that the birds would frantically attempt to climb up on top of the giant plaster dummies, and they would repeatedly slide off because they were too big for them to be able to sit on and incubate them to keep them alive. Oh. He's doing it. This experiment led to the coining of the term of a supernatural stimulus, which is where the birds would see the extreme size of the eggs, which completely overwhelmed the birds' logics. Instead of taking care of their own eggs, they would see these giant eggs, and they felt compelled to have to go sit on these giant eggs because they wanted to have the biggest and best offspring that they could to be able to procreate. And so it overwhelmed their sense of logic, and they ended up going to sit on these ones instead. Let me see, it might be the clicker. That one seems to work. So, sorry about that. So supernormal stimuli are artificial products that are created that activate reward pathways and approach behavior more so than naturally occurring stimuli in the world. So there are these artificial things that are created. They're created in such a way that it causes the birds, in this case, to look at something and say, oh, I want that instead of the thing that I made. Even if it's something that's plaster, it's not even real, I prefer going to that thing instead. So the oyster catcher experiment, the big thing here is that the oyster catchers were tricked. And this was a very interesting experiment that a lot of researchers said, I wonder if that works with these oyster catcher birds, if it works in other places in our natural world. So they looked at herring gold chicks. Herring gold chicks would go up to their mother or father, and the mother and father had beaks with little red slits going down the side of the beak, and they would peck at their mother or father on that red part of the beak in order to get them to feed the little chicks. So what these researchers did, they decided that they would make fake birds, and they made the little slits on the side even more of a dark red and even bigger and brighter to try to attract the gulls, the little birds. And sure enough, the little birds started pecking on these fake dummies, and they would do it even to the point of starvation. They wouldn't go to their own parents. Instead, they would go to these fake dummies. Next, they tried it with stickleback fish. This one's kind of interesting. So for stickleback fish, the males, when it comes time for them to reproduce, their bellies turn a deep dark red color, and then the males will attack each other in order to protect their little space in the river, and in doing so, be able to have their territory to have female fish come, and they can reproduce, and the males that are the bigger and brighter ones are going to have a better chance at creating offspring. So what the researchers did was they created these fake dummy fish with even bigger and even brighter red bellies on them to be able to attract, and sure enough, the males would attack these dummy fish, and they would attack in stronger ways than even they would for a normal situation, and the females were more interested in going after the dummy fish. What these researchers were realizing is that they could control the populations by being able to do this. They could trick these fish to be able to go after the dummies, and that could change the ecosystem that they were living in, which is kind of neat, especially if you're trying to solve problems around an area of having either too many fish or too few fish in an area. They also did this with butterflies. They took butterflies and they showed them cardboard cutouts of other butterflies that were painted in even brighter colors and even larger than the butterflies that they would normally see. And sure enough, the butterflies would go to them and want to reproduce with these big paper cutouts instead of other butterflies. Next, of course, they decided to test this out on humans. If it works for the butterflies, if it works on fish, if it works on birds, maybe it could work on us too. So modern supernormal stimuli examples for us are things like food that's engineered to be even sweeter than fruit or honey. When I first heard that, I thought, that's interesting. I'd never considered that before. If I go to eat a donut, which I love a good donut, does it taste sweeter than any fruit that I've had before or sweeter than any honey that I've had before? How do they do that? Because if I want to make something sweeter, I would want to add sugar to it. But how do they make it even sweeter than sugar? That's kind of interesting. Other things, the infinite scroll that promises the next hit of novelty. So this is something that they realized that you can have your phone, and if you have Facebook, you can be scrolling through, and at a certain time they realized, well, if we find a way to make it where you never hit the end of the scroll and you can just see more and more new things, you'll spend more time scrolling. If you spend more time scrolling, you'll get more advertisements that run across your page. If you get more advertisements, that means they can get a little bit more money, which is nice for them. Nice for us because we get to see some new things that kind of spark our interest. Not only like Facebook, but also Instagram. We've got our Reels. I know that I'm a sucker for that. Or for TikTok, a lot of times the younger ones these days are on TikTok and they'll just be scrolling through and looking at all the different things. Some research has been done on this, and something that's been found is that children these days, and I say children because that's where the research was focused on, I can admit, also on adults these days, a lot of times we'll be up at night, we'll be laying in bed, we'll be trying to fall asleep. If we're having a little bit of trouble, sometimes we'll pull out our phone and just scroll through a few things because we want to see something interesting to occupy our mind before we fall asleep. Next thing you know, it's 11 o'clock, and then scroll a little bit more. Now it's midnight, scroll a little bit more, maybe put the phone down. Still can't fall asleep, pick it up, scroll a little bit more. What's going on is we're getting this supernatural stimuli that's not something normal in our environment, and it's causing our mind to keep thinking and processing on these things, and it keeps us from falling asleep. And so the study was done on children mainly because they're going to school, and so the interest was, well, how is this affecting their schoolwork when they go to school? They're staying up later, it makes it harder for them to wake up, harder to pay attention during the class, so what's the effect then on grades? Now there's also a good benefit here. If they're scrolling through things that are educational, they could learn new things. They could learn about oyster catcher birds. They could learn about the herring gulls. So what's the give and take here? It's something important to consider when thinking about our supernatural stimuli that we have in our lives. Another one is algorithms, echo chambers, and marketing. This is one that I think is really important to consider because as we're scrolling through our phone is learning about us. The algorithms are looking back to see what we're interested in so that they can give us more information that will keep us scrolling so they can get some more ad revenue. And we keep looking and learning. And so our algorithm is tailored to fit our special interests. So that's why when I go and I can scroll, I can find stuff about interesting things like the herring gulls, because it knows that's what I'm going to be interested in. Echo chambers, where we get our information from. That's something that we should consider. Who our friends are, who we talk to when we go to work. If we're only interacting with one segment of society, then all of our information will be similar with that one segment of society, and it could really change our outlook on the world as compared to somebody in Florida or in Iowa or on the other side of the world. So some things to consider there. Lastly, this is all about marketing. It's about people who want to get a little bit more money, and we get a little bit of benefit from it. But the one thing that ties all of this stuff together is that these are things that we consume. And I want to hold on to that, make that a special point. The consuming part, we'll come back to this in a little bit. So supernatural stimuli are like distorted mirrors. I thought this was kind of interesting with a bubble because it kind of looks like a mirror. The supernatural stimuli are designed to keep us perpetually almost satisfied. The goal is not to let somebody become so satisfied that then they put down their interest and walk away. It's made to be able to keep our attention and keep us wanting more. If I eat a donut, I want another donut. There's a whole box of 12 here. I could eat a few more. It'll be all right. If I'm shopping in the store and I'm putting on clothes, if the mirror is bent to make me look a little bit thinner, I might be more interested in buying those clothes, right? Or if the lighting is set up in a way that makes my complexion look better. These are little ways that they can be able to manipulate a little bit in a way that makes us feel better and get things that we might be interested in. But this also leads us to perpetually seeking artificial eggs when the response no longer makes practical sense for us. And that's where we really need to pay attention, is what are the stimuli that are in our world that are artificial, that causes us to no longer make practical sense of our environment and the people that we're interacting with every day. If it's true with our environment and with the way that we interact with others, can this also happen spiritually in our lives? That's something that I was thinking about as I was looking at Revelation and looking at the church of Laodicea. So as I said, the church of Laodicea was very wealthy. The church of Laodicea had some good exports and some good products to be able to provide for the world. They produced black wool in abundance. And they also had a good medical service that they could provide, because in Laodicea there was a type of stone that would be used to be able to make medicine for the eyes when people had swelling, inflammation on their eyes, different types of illnesses. You could get Laodicean eye salve to be able to help clean the eyes and make them better. So we're going to go through Revelation chapter 3, verses 14 to 22. This is where the focus is on the church of Laodicea. And so we'll start off with chapter 3, verse 14. It says, "To the angel of the church in Laodicea write, these are the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the ruler of God's creation. I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, neither cold nor hot, I am about to spit you out of my mouth." So Jesus says, I know your deeds. What does he see when he looks at us? Does he see what we share on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok? Does he see what we project into the world when we're going to our jobs, going to school, when we're with our families, when we're out walking in our neighborhood? How do we see ourselves in our own lives? Do we see ourselves as cold or hot or lukewarm? When Jesus looks at us, he doesn't look through a distorted mirror. There's no supernatural stimuli that could distract him from seeing who we are. He won't be confused. He won't see the favorable images that we want the world to see of ourselves. He's not going to see the unflattering and distorted images that we might see of ourselves when we think about our own things. I know I had a teacher one time. He was actually a pottery teacher that I had in high school. He taught us that we are our own worst critics. And so because of that, he wanted us to grade our own work, and he would take that heavily into consideration when he was giving us a grade on our pottery that we would make. And I thought at first, oh, you're just trying to get out of grading and make it easier on yourself, because if I grade myself, it's a lot less likely that I'm going to complain to anybody. But by the end of that semester, I realized there's truth to this. We are our own worst critics. We know the areas where we struggle in life better than anyone else. When Jesus sees us, he sees us as we are. He knows that we have that judgment of ourselves. He knows that we want to present a better picture of who we are to the world around us, to our community. Jesus doesn't have that distortion. He continues to say, "You say I am rich, I have acquired wealth and do not need a thing, but you do not realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, so you can become rich, and white clothes to wear, so that you can cover your shameful nakedness, and salve to put on your eyes, so that you can see." Now this is interesting. These three things, the gold, the white cloth, and the eye salve. What were the three things that Laodicea was known for? Well, they were the banking center for the area, lots of gold and wealth. They were known for their black wool. Here, Jesus is saying, get white wool. And they were known for their eye salve that they could make using the powder of the stones in Laodicea. And Jesus says, you need eye salve. You need to buy this. The Laodiceans do not know their own spiritual condition. Jesus said, but you do not realize that you are wretched. The Laodiceans think that they're sitting on a perfect egg of their creation. They created the economy that they had in that world. They got the sheep to be able to produce the black wool. They found the stone in the ground that they could use to turn into an eye salve that could help many, many people. And it did help many people. It did clothe many people. But the Laodiceans came to think that they had created all of these things, this perfect egg that they could sit on and wait for it to be able to hatch. But they had deceived themselves. Their spiritual condition is like that plaster egg to the oyster catchers. There's no life inside of it. They're sitting to wait for it to hatch, but it's not going to hatch. Instead of attempting to sit atop their comfy egg, they need to spend their currency instead on gold, white clothes, and eye salve. The gold can be seen as their faith that gets refined through tribulations. The white clothes is Christ's righteousness and healing that he can provide following those tribulations and during those tribulations. And the eye salve is the spiritual discernment and wisdom that they can learn from this process. The cure here is not to try harder. It's a practice of recursive refinement. And so what I mean by this, if I look back at my week that I had, when I was first asked to do this sermon, I knew this week was going to be a tough week. I had orientation this week, and this was the first time that we were doing it for the entire week to have new students coming in and show them what our program is, what our university is, and what's going on, where they can go for things. We had important people that were coming in to do a talk and have a lunch with the students. It was going to be a tough week. There were going to be nights. One night I was out until 8 o'clock at work trying to get things settled. I knew that it would be tough, but then it got tougher. The first day, I got in an hour and a half early. I thought, okay, I'm going to be prepared. This is going to be great. I'll go up and get everything prepared in the room. I got to the room. I went to turn on the computer. It wouldn't turn on. It didn't connect to the AV system. That failed. Had to fix it. It took a full hour of somebody working on it to try to get it fixed. There were loud noises. It was crazy. Monday night, we had a dinner that was planned. We found out a little bit later in the afternoon that a bat had entered the building and was now in the little hallway that connected to the elevator. A couple of days later, we had the big lunch. The next day we had the tablecloths, and I already mentioned a little bit about that. Tablecloths didn't arrive. Had to get them in quick order to be ready for the next day so that we could have this lunch prepared for these important people that were coming in. The next day, got there for the lunch. I got there at 7 o'clock in the morning to make sure that the room was prepared. The director got there and said, oh, no. This room is too small. We need to change everything that we're doing here. So we had to move the tables, move the chairs, move everything back in. Whole ordeal. That ran a little bit late. Had to get to the next meeting before our students did. Got to that room. Computer system of a different room that had worked 2 days prior failed. No idea why. Okay, got that taken care of. Went on to the next thing. We had a walk in the gardens that we had planned with our students. We checked the weather. Everything looked fine. Went out to do the walk. We got halfway through it. Suddenly, there's a downpour of rain. We all pull up our maps to see, okay, well, when is this going to end? And we look at our maps. We have 3 different weather maps between our group. All of them showed that there was no rain in the area. And then the last thing that happened, I get back, we're going to go through our handbook to explain to the students what they can expect from our program, where they can go online to find their resources, and all of a sudden, the university's website goes down. Every website attached to it goes down. We can't show them the links that they need. These were all unplanned things. I knew that it was going to be a tough week. I did not know how tough. But if I look back at it, I can see I had that tribulation. I had challenges that were presented every step of the way that I hadn't expected. I didn't know why I was getting that tribulation, but I needed Christ's healing. There were frustrating moments. There were moments where I was being told to change things at the last minute, otherwise it would be an absolute disaster. It was tough. I needed to be able to look back at it and get that spiritual discernment and wisdom. That was what I grappled with the most, was trying to see, okay, here's a challenge. God, what are you trying to teach me with this? Why is it so hard to just go through this and have everything work, or at least anything work like it's supposed to on a normal day? I wasn't sure of that until just probably last night as I was thinking about it. I had this going on today. So of course, all of those challenges were set up. Number one, it would prevent me from being able to work as hard as I was planning to work, but also it's something that I can be able to share. It's a little story from my life that I can share of struggles where I'm sure all of you, and I've talked to some of you already, have had struggles this week as well. So if we're able to look back on that, we can see where God was able to be with us during those struggles. We can see how we reacted to those situations. I can look back and see how I talked to my coworkers, how my coworkers talked to me, what we did in moments of crisis, and through all of that, how we were able to come together and form stronger bonds. When something went wrong, we knew who to talk to go and solve that issue. We knew who was stronger at getting the catering order all put together. We knew who was stronger at handling the IT work. It was all in the formation of these bonds that we had with each other. In what happens in the environment, in our world with people that might not be part of church, same thing here, right? Building those bonds through tribulation, building strength in our community. This is a practice of refinement, a practice of sharpening ourselves through the tribulations. Next, Jesus says, "Those whom I love, I rebuke and discipline. So be earnest and repent. When reading this, I thought, okay, well, rebuke and discipline, earnest and repent, what do these really mean if we really look into it? Those whom I love, I rebuke and discipline. So this is a practice of listening, learning, reflecting, and adjusting. It takes time to do these things. If we look at rebuking and disciplining, this is an educational process. The root for discipline is similar to that of disciple, or the one who is learning, the learner. Jesus is saying here, those who I love, I'll rebuke, I'll correct the path that you're on, and I'll give you an education to be able to help you understand the ways where things might have gone wrong and see other paths where things could go right. So our job then is to be earnest and repent. So being earnest, we need to be good scholars. We need to look back and reflect on our life. We need to look back over the week and see those challenges and tribulations that we had and take some time to learn and see what pathways we used, the people that we grew closer to throughout the week. We need to see the ways that we could do better, the people that we distanced ourselves from throughout the week. And we need to repent and repair those relationships that we have. Most of all, it's important to remember that this is a process that takes time, so we should be patient, and we need to listen. We need to listen to those that are around us to see what we can learn, but most importantly, we need to listen to God. And we need to listen because next he says, "Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me." So as we listen, we can hear that knocking, that process of repeatedly bumping up against the door. It's showing this process that's recursive. It happens over and over. Jesus is standing outside knocking, saying, "Please let me come in to be able to eat with you and dine with you, and you will eat with me and dine with me." He wants to share a meal with us. Throughout history, eating together has been an important part of building relationships not only with each other, but also with other communities. And it's important in building relationships across different countries and different peoples. Just this week, having food that was Puerto Rican food, Indian food, these things help bring people together and help people say, okay, I know what you eat and you know what I eat. It's a practice that creates fellowship and acceptance, peace, belonging, and a relationship. And these are the things that Jesus wants from us. This is what he's telling us in these chapters, is that he wants to have that fellowship with us, the acceptance, peace, and belonging, and a relationship. Now, if you want to have a relationship, it's not that one time that you open the door and let him in, right? You have to repeatedly do it through that process. Bring Jesus in and build that relationship. And the relationship is built over consuming the meal. Consuming together is important. This loops back to what we were discussing at the beginning, right? The supernatural stimuli are the things that we are consuming. Supernatural stimuli are the things that we consume that are not natural. They're the artificial things that are put in place to distract us and get us to go in a certain direction instead of the natural direction that we would want to go in life. All of this is about what we are consuming. Are we consuming the things that will help build that relationship with Jesus? Let's consider what stops us from opening the door and eating with Jesus. What are the things that get in the way of our Bible studies, of our prayer life, of the time that we get to share Jesus with those that are around us, whether it's directly through our word of mouth or through our practices and our walk in our daily life? What are those things that stop us from opening that door? Sometimes it can be work. As I mentioned earlier this week, I had a night that went on until 8 o'clock. By the time that I got home, Miles was already asleep. That's tough. But you got to have a job too. So the important thing here is to consider what are these things that could be blocking your relationship with Jesus, and if there are things, what are ways that you could be able to repair that? Maybe getting up earlier in the morning if you've got a job that's going to keep you out late. Same thing in our relationships with others. I didn't get home until 8 o'clock that night. Well, you know, at 1 o'clock in the morning when he was crying to go to the restroom and get a hug, I was so quick to get up and go run into that room because I knew I needed that time just as much as he did. In our relationships with others in our life, what's keeping us from opening the door and eating with our neighbors and with our friends? Because if we take the time to do that, and if we're taking time to eat with Jesus, they're coming to sit down at the same table. They'll be sitting down to eat with us and to eat with Jesus in that process. What are the giant plaster eggs that we sit on in our daily lives? We need to buy some eye salve in order to see the plaster eggs that we're sitting on. The buying of the eye salve is what we were discussing earlier, where there's this process that we have to go through repeatedly. It's a process that will take time. It takes reflection. It's very important to take that time to reflect. And the good thing is we have a whole day at the end of the week to do that every week. And when we're losing the we also need to consider when we are losing the opportunity to dine with Jesus. When we're losing the opportunity to dine with our family. When we're losing the opportunity to dine with our neighbors and our friends. And when we're losing the opportunity to dine with our community and the people that are around us. Community can be the people here around this church as well, even if we're traveling from far away. Or it could be the people in our neighborhood that we might not be talking to on a regular basis. Or it could be the people, I know I work all the way out in Durham. Our community is very large. It's also the people that we're talking to on Facebook or on Instagram. The community is a lot bigger than what we would normally think when we think about our community. And we're very blessed to have this opportunity in the same way that the Laodiceans were blessed with lots of wealth and very nice goods to be able to provide to people, to provide healing and provide warmth. We have these blessings that we can be able to share to those people in our community as well. So let's remember that and try to find those ways that we can in this process of reflection. And this chapter ends with, "To the one who is victorious, I will give the right to sit with me on my throne, just as I was victorious and sat down with my Father on his throne. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches." And I think this is a beautiful ending to this chapter. Jesus wants us to reflect on our lives and take the time to be able to build a stronger community with each other and a stronger community with him. And through this process, we get the right to sit with him on his throne. The right to sit with him on his throne just as his Father gave him the right to sit with him. So whoever has an ear to be able to hear this message, Jesus implores to hear it, to listen, to take that time to practice listening by looking back over our experiences so that then we can come together and have this growth as a church and as a people. If you'll bow